Hi, I'm going to try to keep this short this week because most of your time is going to be spent revising Project 2 and thinking about your research questions for Project 3. So it might seem like a little bit of a heavier writing week in that sense, but then we're going to get to slow down in the coming weeks and really work on reading deeply into the topics that you're researching. So I'm going to take a few minutes to talk to you about some reminders for revising Project 2 and then some things to think about as you work on composing your research questions for Projects 3 and 4. As I go through your drafts of Project 2 early this week, rather than repeatedly giving really general reminders that are available in the assignment descriptions, I am going to try to give each of you 3 or 4 questions or suggestions that will help you work deeper into the project and maybe focusing on the areas of your paper that need the most attention. So my comments won't cover everything that you might think about as you look at your draft, but I will try to key in on some areas where I can be the most helpful. So what I want to give you all now are just some reminders of things that you can do as you revise the project or prepare to revise the project that would be really helpful. The first thing to do whenever you are revising writing for an assignment or for a specific task and not just for your own enjoyment is to review the directions for what you're writing. So in this case, go back to the Project 2 assignment description, go back to the brainstorming questions in that assignment description and in the project folder, and look at the rubric that's in that assignment description to make sure that you are doing all of the moves that are required in that genre analysis. One key thing I want to remind you of is that you are analyzing a peer-reviewed article from your discourse community, whether that's finance or nursing or something else, as well as one of the 4 available articles from our shared class discourse community, writing studies, that are in the readings folder. So make sure that you remember to analyze 2 articles for this project. It might be helpful for you to review the video and the student samples from week 4. In that video, I talked through one of the examples and I left annotations in one of the documents that you might want to check out. Some of my comments in that student's draft are affirmative, showing you where you might make certain moves in your draft of Project 2. And in some of my comments, I make suggestions for what else the student could have done to do a stronger draft. Remember also, when you're looking at student samples, not to use those as templates, but rather to use them as a way of getting ideas for how to organize and write about things in your drafts of the articles that you've selected, but don't use them as templates to just plug in or fill in the blank. You should also review your classmates' and instructors' comments and suggestions on the draft and think about those. Sometimes going back and giving those a second reading can help you key in on ideas that are helpful. One of you wrote in your process memo that it was really helpful for you to look at the positive comments that you got and to find those moments in your draft and think about how you could make other parts of your draft kind of follow along with those things that were going well. And I thought that was really insightful. This will take some time, but it's totally worth it. Reread the text that you're analyzing. So go back to that article from your discourse community and go back to the writing studies article, whether it's Wordle or Harris or Miller or Devitt Bawarshian Reef, and read them again with your pen or pencil in hand. Sometimes on a second or third reading, new ideas will start to emerge in terms of your analysis because you're better understanding the argument of the text, you're better understanding how the entire text is constructed. That was one of my initial comments to many of you on your summaries of the writing studies text, was that you needed to go back and better understand what the argument was and how it was constructed. And then finally go back to your draft and work through rewriting, adding, deleting, and reorganizing ideas. Remember that sometimes that's not something you can do in one sitting. Sometimes you need to go back to the text that you're analyzing and spend some time looking at that document and then bounce back to your paper. maybe it's going to take you a little bit of time each day for a few days to work through those revisions. So make sure that you leave that time in your week this week. A final thought is to check and make sure that you are using the proper in-text and end citations for the formatting that's expected in your field. A simple Google search can help you identify what that kind of formatting is if you haven't done so already. So then make sure that next week you upload all of the materials, your final draft, your process memo, and then I've listed examples of things that can go in your invention portfolio, which is there for both of us, me and you, to be able to assess your work over the course of the semester and think about what's working well in your process and what could be working a little bit better. Next, I want to talk to you for a few minutes about refining your research questions. At the end of Project 1, you were to draft a few questions that you would be interested in researching, and some of you are using those questions to select the text that you're analyzing for Project 2. But now it's going to be time for you to refine those research questions and think about how best to craft or write the research question to lead you into designing a research study in Project 4. So the very first thing I want you to reflect on this week is simply what you're interested in reading and writing about. Is there something that you need to know or want to know more about? Maybe something that you've come across in your discussions with your interviewees in Project 1, or something that you just know is important in the field. What kind of research work seems valuable for you to focus on for the rest of the semester? What will hold your interest for several weeks as we work through writing a literature review and then designing a research proposal? But it's not enough just to know what you care about. You also should think about what the field is interested in, because when writers and researchers in a discourse community develop topics that they're going to conduct studies on and then get published, they're more successful when there's a demonstrated interest or concern for that issue in the field. So think about, what are the current issues or discussions in the field? When you look at the online databases for scholarly work in your field, what topics are popping up? What seems to be really significant? What do people care about? Where does some work need to be done? Then work on rephrasing your questions to move from fact-finding to opening inquiry. Take a look at the research questions the way they look now. When you read the question, will you need to look at more than one source to find information? Or is your question kind of a basic, like, what classes do I have to take for this major? Or what are the key job differences between someone doing this task in the field and this other task? Those are pretty basic fact-finding kinds of questions that wouldn't take a lot of research. Instead, you want to pose a question that's open enough that you can invite discussion on the topic from a number of perspectives. So when we're writing the literature review, you can get different arguments on the topic, a number of different kinds of studies, just to understand the way that this issue has been looked at before. You also want to make sure that you can locate scholarly sources on that topic. So doing some initial database research this week in the Wayne State Library's databases for your discipline would be really helpful. See what's out there, make that part of the initial work you do, and think about whether the question will prepare you to design your own research study of the topic, which we will work on more in Project 4, but we want to prepare questions that best support that as the next project. Another thing that you can do is review the text that you've read so far to identify their implicit or explicit research questions. I say implicit or explicit because sometimes within the introduction or even the methods section of a text, the researchers and scholars will state exactly what their research questions were. Sometimes you might need to infer what that research question was. You can find clues in the text. Maybe they write their question more as a statement, and they say, I'm going to look at X. And so I want you to think about how that might be written as a question. So I just picked two from texts that many of you have read this semester. When I look at Wardle's text, I would call her research question implicit because she poses some conversational questions about the topic she's researching toward right before the study part of her essay, but after the literature review. So I kind of revised those into a question like this: what happens when a new worker's assumptions about discourse are in conflict with the community's expectations? And then she looks at Alan's experience to understand what happened to this particular person in this case study. Harris's implicit research question seems to be something like, how can we use the scholarship in the field to develop a more useful sense of community? And he does look at student text, but he's also trying to see what other information and discussion is out there and kind of really how to think and shape that discussion of community. In the text that you read for your genre analysis, you may be able to identify explicit research questions, so take a look at how those writers have shaped those. Another writing task you have for this week is to revise your research questions to prepare for Project 3. Blog 3 for this week asks you to revise those questions and then draft a research plan. So that's why, like I said earlier, doing a little bit of initial database researching would be a really good move. And then from here, we're going to spend a few weeks reading intensely in our topics and crafting literature reviews that demonstrate the larger conversation around the issue. So we're really looking at what various scholars and researchers have said about this topic already so that you can position your study in that conversation. So there's a lot on your plate this week as we move from Project 2 and writing a revision of that into Project 3. But hopefully Project 2 is giving you a sense through the analysis you're doing of what peer-reviewed scholarly academic articles look like in your field and look like in different fields, so that as we begin to craft our literature reviews and research proposals, you can take on some of those genre conventions and discourse moves that are valued in the field that you're writing in.